Welcome to the Bard's Tavern, where we get all cozy and warm, while I, Jake the Bard, your humble guide, helps you learn all things musical instrument repair and building and customization related. Jake from the future here. I look away from the camera a lot in this video. It's because I have a lot of visual aids, and I wanted to make sure that I stayed up on my notes, and I also wanted to make sure that the tools that I was showcasing were showing up in the frame with my monitoring. So, yeah, that's why I look away from the camera a lot in this episode. Back to your regularly scheduled Jake the Bard. Today, we're going to go over what I feel are the best beginner tools for a fledgling band instrument repair tech. And in this video, we're going to cover specifically the tools that are used in working on woodwinds and brass instruments. We have a lot of tools to cover today, so have a seat, grab your favorite note-taking device, and pour yourself a tasty beverage while I tell you where you should be spending your hard-earned coin to make instruments great again. Disregard that slogan. Anyway, first up on the list is screwdrivers. These are some of the most important and widely used tools you will use throughout your entire career. The problem is that there are so many different types of screwdrivers that it can be easy to get lost in a sea of available options. They come in all styles, price points. It makes the job of picking a good set even more daunting. Thankfully, I have visual aids today. The screwdrivers I use are, well, let me start out with the screwdrivers I started with. The screwdrivers I started with are these. These are Weehaw screwdrivers, and I use these for the majority of my career. Well, I have used these for the majority of my career. I got them on day one, and they have been really good screwdrivers. They are relatively inexpensive. They have a lot of different blade widths, and they come in different blade lengths as well. And these are great. I still use this one an awful lot because it's nice and long and the blade is nice and wide. But these are great, and I like them. I did upgrade shortly after I started repair school, but that's just because I wanted to get screwdrivers that fit my hand a little bit better. And I'll cover those just really, really briefly as kind of a teaser for my tool upgrade video. But to start, these are great. The handles, they're a little small for my hands, like I said, but they've got a swivel on them, which is really nice, and I like them a lot. They will serve you quite well. And here are the screwdrivers that I upgraded to shortly after I started repair school. These are from a company called J.L. Smith, and they're really great screwdrivers. Here's one fully assembled, and it's got a nice metal handle with a swivel on the back here, and the blades are interchangeable with other blades, which is really nice. So you can do like a big fat handle like this, or you can do a little more of a skinny handle like this, and they're just really useful. Now, the reason that I don't have all of these mounted with blades, or with blades mounted in them rather, is because after a decade of doing this, I kind of decided that doing this all the time with my screwdrivers and just twisting and twisting and twisting was putting a bit of a strain on my wrist. And so I got an electric screwdriver handle, and I made some little adapters for my screwdriver blades that I can just pop in here and go to town. Isn't that cool? Now, this is very cool, and I'm going to be going over these in more detail later, but these are from a company called Fantic. If you can, there we go. If you can see the little logo there. These are really popular on Amazon now, and they come with a whole bunch of different screwdriver blade attachments, and they're really great. However, none of these are particularly good for instrument repair because they just aren't long enough. Let me just grab a random one here. Even the longest ones just aren't really long enough to accommodate working on a clarinet or let alone a saxophone. So I work on a lot of electronics, so this is still useful to me, but I got it primarily for the handle. And yeah, it's great. It's got a little light on it, and it's USB-C rechargeable, and you can change the torque too, which is really nice. But like I said, teaser for a new video, for an upgrade video. The next set of screwdrivers that I highly recommend are these. A couple of Phillips head screwdrivers. These are really nice. I recommend getting them in a number 1 Phillips blade and a number 2 Phillips blade. And these ones, the brand is a little less important than just having them. I happen to like the Craftsman classic blue handle Phillips screwdrivers. They're really awesome. They're not that expensive and they last forever. Then this number 1 here is just from a hardware store that's primarily located in the Midwest of the United States called Menards. And I kind of inherited this one and it served me just fine. If you want to get your Phillips head screwdrivers from Ace Hardware, Lowe's, your local like mom and pop hardware store, that's totally cool. It really doesn't matter because Phillips head screwdrivers are really just kind of the same-ish, at least for what we're doing. We're not doing anything incredibly high torque with our Phillips head screwdrivers in instrument repair, and they're really useful. So go with the least expensive options you find, or if you happen to have a brand preference, you can go with those. But Craftsman, Ace Hardware brand, Husky brand, Cobalt brand, Masterforce, that's the one from Menards, they're all fine. Get yourself a couple of Phillips screwdrivers, like I said, a number 1 and a number 2, and you'll be rocking and rolling. Second on the list is pliers. And just like with screwdrivers, there are a ton of options for good sets of pliers, and the different types of pliers are kind of intense, like the number of them. I would start with 4 different types of pliers to start out, possibly 7, but I'll explain why when we get to them. The first is a good set of needle nose pliers. These are awesome. These are from a brand called Knipex. It's spelled Knipex, and they are really good. For the longest time, I thought they were pronounced Nipex, and lots of people think that too. It's not. It's pronounced Knipex. They are a German brand, and the Germans make very good pliers. These are great because they have a smooth jaw on them, which is really, really nice. You really don't want pliers that have teeth on the jaws, with one exception, which I will explain in a moment. But these needle nose pliers are very, very nice. You can use them to manipulate keys, grab little needle springs. They are very useful, multifaceted, multi-use tool, which every repair tech must have. Second are my favorite pair of pliers, and these are called parallel pliers. These are, once again, from the same brand, Knipex, and these have an adjustable jaw, kind of like channel locks, but they have a little spring-loaded button on here, so you can set the width, and these also have smooth jaws, which is nice. These are particularly great for gripping hinge rods in like clarinets and in saxophones, and I will use a screwdriver. Let me grab one of my screwdriver blades as a visual aid. Imagine this is the hinge rod of a clarinet, and you need to grab them and pull it out of the hinge tube and the post and all of that. You can get a really nice solid grip on the hinge rod, and it won't wobble about. And since you can adjust the width of the jaws, you can even have a much nicer handle shape instead of it being way out to here to grab something. They're very nice. And to contrast that, if you were to grab a hinge rod with a set of needle nose pliers, then yeah, you can grab it, but you have very little contact points, and you can actually wobble a hinge rod out and it'll slip out of the pliers. It's not really great. You can actually mar hinge rods and things like that with that, so parallel pliers are an excellent tool. Next up on the list, I don't have my visual aid for because I forgot to grab them, but they are slip joint pliers. I'm going to put a photo of some right here. They are the only pliers that I recommend actually having teeth because I use them to remove the tenon cork off of clarinets. I'll show that in a future video. There are a bunch of techniques that I want to demonstrate. That's not for this video. This video is just talking about tools. But a good pair of slip joint pliers is excellent to have. I also occasionally use them to hold like hot things that I just soldered or brazed. It's not super necessary to have a really nice set of slip joint pliers. Mine are a Stanley brand, and take from that what you will. Next up are these are a really good tool. These are what we call duckbill pliers, and they're very similar to needle nose pliers, except that they have a much wider jaw, and I like to use these to manipulate keys if you need to kind of tweak saxophone keys back and forth. They're really nice. I love them. They're very useful. Very much a multi-purpose tool. Now, onto my pliers that aren't really entirely necessary when you're very first starting out, but they're good to have. These are needle spring setting and removing pliers. Now, these ones, I don't know if my camera's gonna pick up on it, but there's a little nub right here, and you can use that if you've got a broken needle spring in a post that you need to remove. This little nubbin can stick in there and push a needle spring out, which is really handy when you've got a broken needle spring. They are a big challenge sometimes to get out, and these make it a whole lot easier. These are very nice to have. I do recommend getting a pair of these or a pair similar to these, but it's not the immediate concern unless you run into a lot of broken needle springs, which does happen. And these are very similar. They have a little hole in there so you can kind of get around, but these are really great for setting needle springs in place. They have kind of a triple clamp look to them, and then this side has a slot in it so that you can actually get a needle spring in between those two spots, those 2 points, and you can just stick a needle spring in there and get it into the hole with a lot more ease than otherwise. And my last pair of pliers, and there are multiple different styles of these as well. These are slide pulling pliers, and I like them an awful lot. These ones are a little rough to open and close, but it's okay. It's not that critical with these. These have a set screw so you can set the width of the pliers when they're in the fully closed position. And these are meant to just help you unstick the tuning slides of brass instruments. They are a very useful tool. I highly recommend getting them. Not necessarily the most necessary for a beginner budget toolbox, but they're very good to have. I will be covering these more in depth with demonstrations in future videos and in my upgrade videos. Let's move on to hammers. There are a few different hammers that I recommend, and none of them start with the words claw or ball peen. First up on the list is the rawhide mallet. These are really useful because the hitting surface is basically just tanned and dried animal hide. And the hide is hard enough to smack things and provide a nice little lateral adjustment to whatever you're working on. But the rawhide is also soft enough that it doesn't really mar surfaces all that much. And when you get them, they have a nice clean surface on them. You actually kind of want to break these in. Some people score them with razor blades. Some people hit them against the anvils of like vices and things like that. I do a little bit of both. This is actually the rawhide mallet that I got with my very first toolkit, and I still use it. It's a very good tool. It's a really, really handy tool. And some people like to modify theirs by cutting wedge shapes out of one side so they can get kind of a more localized impact on their hammers. I don't do that with this one because I have a different tool for that, which is another tool I recommend. Let's move on to it. This is the canvas hammer, and it's similar to the rawhide mallet in that it's made of kind of a softer material. It's just canvas that's effectively epoxied together. And it already has a wedge on there just like that. And so you can get nice local pressure and impact when you're working on stuff. I use this to help straighten hinge tubes and keys and things like that. It's got a nice flat surface here. Mine's kind of chipped away a little bit because I've used this a lot. This is my second or third one that I've gone through. They do tend to wear down over time. And same thing with rawhide mallets. They wear down. These are tools that are made to be consumed at some point, although they are very hard-wearing and long-lasting. The next tool that I recommend is the good old-fashioned trusty dent hammer. These are very similar to the hammers that you would find in like an automotive body shop. They have a nice steel, highly polished face on them. They're very nice. You want to keep them highly polished and rust-free. That way you're not adding weird occlusions in the brass that you're whacking with it. And you use these in conjunction with various irons and rollers and other dent tools that I'll cover in a future video. A lot of dent tools are really upgrades, and this could be in that camp, but it's just good to have a set of dent hammers because you can do some hollow tapping on dents. I'm going to demonstrate some dent removal techniques as well, but a good set of dent hammers are very nice. And for your first one, I recommend getting one similar to this with one hammering surface larger than the other, and take care of them because they need to be, like I said, highly polished, very clean, and they will serve you well. Fourth on the list is spring hooks. Now these are pretty much woodwind specific tools, and my next few tools are going to be kind of woodwind specific. Spring hooks are essentially fancy crochet hooks. These are the best ones in my opinion. These are from a company called Music Medic, and I had a different set of spring hooks when I started, but on day one of repair school, my instructor asked us all to remove all of our spring hooks that we had ordered from our toolboxes and hand them to him. And he said, "Thank you very much. These are staying with me. Here is your nice new set of spring hooks." The reason I think he did that was because they, for some reason, didn't get updated in our college tool list of things to buy, and he wanted to just make sure that we had the best spring hooks available, and that was these. These are the ones that I've had since I started repairing. They are excellent, and like I said, they're effectively just fancy, tiny crochet hooks. And I'm going to use my pinky here just to demonstrate the hook on there. And so what you do with these is you manipulate needle springs. Remember what we talked about before with these guys? You can manipulate needle springs and engage them onto the spring saddles so that the keys actually work. And they are very useful. They've got two different ends. One is great for pushing and pulling. One is great for pushing mostly. They're just really, really awesome. I highly recommend a set of Music Medic spring hooks. They are, in my opinion, the best. Now, we have the pad prick. Now this is a dangerous tool. I definitely did not stab all the way through my finger with one of these before. That's a story for another day too. The pad prick is a very useful tool, and you can make them as basic or as elaborate as you want. You can do it with a piece of cut-off drumstick and a sewing needle that you stick in the end and glue in place. I did mine with a nice piece of brass on a lathe, and I added a hole and a set screw. These are really great. And then I used a blued steel needle spring on mine, and the bluing's actually worn off of mine. But this is a really great tool. You can use this to stick pads and maneuver them into place. You can use it to remove pads from key cups for when you're going to throw the pads away and replace them. It's a really, really handy tool. Next up on the list is the pad slick. Now this is a brass or copper or bronze little wedge-shaped tool that is used for manipulating how a pad sits in the pad cup while the adhesive is molten. And you do this because, for one, it's kind of hard to stick your finger up in there and maneuver the pad with your finger. And two, pad cups are really, really, really hot when you melt the glue, and I don't recommend touching them. Ask me how I know. But these are really great for kind of maneuvering pads and kind of pre-positioning them before you go to seat them on the tone hole. Next up is something similar to a pad prick, and this is a pin vise. And you can pick one of these up at a lot of places. It's not absolutely necessary all the time, but if you don't want to make a pad prick, you can use one of these, and it's just a little vise, and you tighten it down, and you can add a sewing needle, or you can add a blued steel spring in there, and they have multiple size ends on there for you to pick the size of needle spring or sewing needle that you want, and they are very useful. Next up on the list after that is feeler gauges. Now, I made this one. You can buy them. I like making tools. That's one of the joys of instrument repair, is making your own tools. At least I enjoy it. This is a feeler gauge, and this is used for confirming whether a pad on a woodwind is sealing well or not. And I actually have two different thicknesses of feeler gauge material on here. And this is effectively just like a mylar material in a set thickness. I can't remember off the top of my head what thickness each of these are, but the silver one is way thinner than the orange one. And what you do is, when you seat your pad, imagine that my middle finger here is a pad and my index finger here is the tone hole. You put the feeler gauge in there and pull, and if it tugs, like if there's a little resistance when you're tugging the feeler gauge out, then it's a good indication that you've got a sealed pad. Very useful tool. I highly recommend it, especially if you're going to be doing any sort of woodwind repair work. This is an essential tool. You can buy them. I like to make mine. Next up is kind of a tool that is useful for both brass instruments and woodwinds, and that is little tweezers that are sprung shut. You want tweezers that are sprung shut. And I actually put some heat shrink tubing on this pair so that they were a little softer when I was gripping delicate keys and things like that. But these are really great for holding things that you're about to solder. They're great for holding keys in place. They're just really, really multi-purpose and multi-use. They're very handy. They're inexpensive. They are absolutely worth having in your toolbox. I recommend getting some that are straight like these. I recommend some that have a little dog leg like this. I recommend just having a bunch of these in your toolbox. Start with 2 or 3 and then go from there. All right, next up is one of my all-time favorite tools. This is called a leak light, and it's a really great tool. It lights up like this, and this is meant for detecting leaks in pads of clarinets and saxophones and oboes and flutes. And it's really, really handy. It's got a nice bright, it looks kind of white in my camera, but it's orange. And since I'm a lover of Star Wars, as you may have noticed back there, I have a lightsaber on my wall. This is kind of like an instrument repair tech's lightsaber, and it's very useful. Highly recommend getting one of these. My eyes are now burning. But this can help you locate leaks in pads by depressing the pads, and if you see little crescents of light peering through instead of like a diffused glow, then you know you've got a leak somewhere. This is a very useful tool. It's on the expensive side, but this one will last years and years and years and years and years. You can make your own. I have done it. I don't know what I did with it, but you can make your own with like the cheap LED strips and a little like power bank with a USB cable. These are very useful. I like them a whole lot. They're very nice. I will be covering these in more detail with demonstrations and things like that in the future. Okay, next up is torches. These are very useful tools. You use these to solder. You use these to melt pad adhesive. You use these in a ton of different scenarios. There are upgrades. There are cheap versions. There are a lot of different options when it comes to torches. I recommend starting out with a little butane torch like this, and it also helps if it has a little base that it can sit on so that you can hold things and have the flame going while it's sat down. These tools demand respect, and it is a flame that will really, really hurt you or catch things on fire. But they're very nice. You can get them very inexpensively at places like Harbor Freight, and they might not last the longest in the world, but they do the job. This one is a Blazer brand. I recommend them highly. They are very good, and there are definitely upgrades in the torch category. I will cover those in a future video. My big torch, or my upgraded torch rather, is a little difficult to get on camera right now, but I will show you in a future video, rest assured. The only thing I recommend against with torches is don't get the little butane like torch lighters. They have their uses, but just get one of these. They're really nice. They're relatively inexpensive. And yeah, you pair that with a bottle of butane and you're rocking and rolling and you're good to go. Awesome tools. Next up are bladed tools. And there are two types of bladed tools that I recommend getting. First is the single-edged, mine's kind of stuck in here, so I'm not gonna try and remove it. Single-edged razor blades. You will go through a ton of these, and honestly, I kind of debated on whether or not I should include these in this video or in a supply video. And the reason is you will go through a whole bunch of these that they may as well be a supply, but I figured it would just be good to count these as both tools and supplies. So you'll probably see these in multiple videos, but you will go through a lot of single-edged razor blades. You use them for cutting corks, you use them for shaving bumpers, you use these a whole lot. I highly recommend getting a whole pack of them because you're going to be going through them a bunch. Now, I also recommend getting some kind of sharps container or sharps bin. You can buy them that are the same. You can buy ones that are the same type as like you find in hospitals for syringes and needles, or you can just get like a Folgers coffee can or a Maxwell House coffee can, whatever brand of coffee you like, but get a coffee can, cut a slot in the lid, make sure you document on the lid and on the coffee can that this is for sharp things, and make a sharp spin that way. And then you just deposit your used blades into that. It's a very good way to make sure that you don't have loose used blades just going into the trash or anywhere, and then make sure you dispose of them properly, because you really don't want somebody reaching into the trash or taking out the trash and getting cut up. Be responsible with your blades. Next up is the jeweler's saw. This is a very useful tool. You use this for cutting sheet brass if you're making a patch for a piece of for a cracked tuning slide. You use this to cut new hinge rods. You can use this to remove old hinge rods that are corroded and stuck. This is a very, very useful tool. It has an adjustable length, and the blades come in different sizes. The blades come in different kerfs, which is really nice. The kerf is the thickness of the blade. You can also get them in different tooth densities if you want a finer cut or a more coarse cut. These are very useful tools. I've had this jeweler's saw since day one of getting into instrument repair. It's a very useful tool. Buy many blades. You will go through a lot of them. I find that I accidentally break some with just about every project, but it's a very useful tool. Next up, in the same vein as soldering with torches and things like that, you need something to scrape old solder and prep surfaces for soldering. This is a solder scraper. It is pretty sharp. It has 3 blades on it. It's kind of a triangular bladed thing. It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but this is used for prepping surfaces for soldering. This is used for scraping old layers of solder off. It's a very useful tool. Okay, here we are at my penultimate tool for a beginning band instrument repair tech on a budget. Have you ever been to a hockey game and thought, oh, I wonder if I could use a hockey puck in instrument repair? I thought not. Neither did I until a very early mentor of mine in band instrument repair turned me onto these, and he gave me my first hockey puck. These are incredibly useful. You can use them to raise up an instrument to get a little bit of a different angle if you need to do something like that. You can use them as cutting surfaces. They are a hard rubber, but they're soft enough that they won't hurt anything. These are so useful. I love hockey pucks. I also love like 6-inch length sections of 4x4 timber because you can use those as like punching surfaces. Like if you have like a set of punches to make little discs of corks and stuff like that. But these are great cutting tools. They're great multi-purpose tools. I highly recommend getting at least a couple hockey pucks. They're cheap. You can get them at any sporting goods store. I love them. I couldn't do my job without hockey pucks these days. That's how much I use them. And now we are at my last essential tool for a beginning band instrument repair tech. Mouthpieces. You absolutely must be able to test the instruments that you're working on. And it's really gross to use someone else's mouthpiece. Now, you can buy used mouthpieces and clean them. Players and shops buy and sell used mouthpieces all the time. But you need to have a set of mouthpieces that belong to you and that you're comfortable with. Get a mouthpiece for every type of instrument you plan to work on. I would start with the basic band instruments like clarinet, alto saxophone, trumpet, trombone, and maybe a tuba. You can get beginning mouthpieces pretty inexpensively. Just make sure you clean them thoroughly if they're used. You will also need to get ligatures and some reeds for your woodwind mouthpieces. If you're already a player, then just keep using the reeds and mouthpieces that you're used to. If you aren't, then my recommendation is a brand and model called the Rico No. 2 reed. They're inexpensive, they're high quality, they're available for every single reed woodwind instrument, and they're easy to find. You can add different mouthpieces and double reeds to your toolbox as you get a better idea of what you'd like to be working on later. So there you have it. Those are the basic tools that I recommend getting for doing band instrument repair work. There are plenty of other tools to buy, and there are a ton of different supplies that are necessary as well that I'll be covering in a future video. I'll post links to the different tools that I like below in either the description or a pinned comment, and tell me about the tools that you like or are curious about in the comments. I'm happy to offer more specific advice about tool purchases and selections. I've been Jake the Bard. Now, go fix something.